We're going to start the show with Josh Heupel speaking yesterday. He spoke to the media ahead of Tennessee's bye week. And what really stood out to me, and we're going to get to this, is he spoke about players who missed the South Carolina game who he expects back by Texas A&M. There were three specifically. They were all hurt for the game. Dont'e Thornton at wide receiver, Andrej Karic at offensive line, and Jeremiah Crawford at offensive line. All three missed the game. Heupel said he expects all of them back for Texas A&M. But, Gyro, I want to ask you the question first. Who does Tennessee need back the most among those three?
I would have to say Dont'e Thornton, honestly, just after the Brew McCoy injury. I know he's been sort of a lackluster addition compared to the preseason hype he got, but you lose Brew McCoy and now you're down one receiver. If one more person gets banged up in that receiver room, you're relying on, Caleb Webb, Chaz Nimrod. You're going all the way down to, a Nate Leacock to keep the wide receiver room going. So I think even though he's been kind of not lived up to expectations, kind of had a rough start to the season, he's still a veteran guy who has a lot of boom potential and a lot of natural skills. So I would have to lean Dont'e Thornton just after the Brew McCoy injury, but you can make an argument, I feel like, for the offensive lineman too, because that unit's still struggling a little bit.
Yeah, it's not Dont'e Thornton. And I would have said Dont'e Thornton too at the beginning of the year with the Brew McCoy injury. It's Jeremiah Crawford. I don't want to knock Dane Davis. I thought the right tackle position was fine last weekend against South Carolina. Texas A&M's front four is significantly better than South Carolina's front four. And you need Jeremiah Crawford for that game. He actually, if you really watch him, he hasn't been a significant drop-off from Darnell Wright. Now, Darnell Wright's amazing, but Jeremiah Crawford has been very reliable at right tackle when he's in the game. Theoretically, you would say Andrej Karic or Dont'e Thornton because they both actually fill a void at left guard and wide receiver. But the problem is, I don't think Andrej Karic, I'm going to say it, Jared, I want to know what your thoughts are. I just don't think he can play at this level. I think he was overrated.
Yeah, his build is kind of doesn't look right for an offensive lineman. He doesn't look like he's got the weight that you need to be able to throw around in the SEC. And another thing is, unlike a John Campbell who started at Miami, Andrej Karic struggled to get in the rotation at Texas and then came to Tennessee and was kind of inserted immediately. So you kind of saw it already that he wasn't the guy when he was a Longhorn compared to, another offensive lineman transfer, John Campbell, who started at Miami and transferred for the sole fact that he just wanted more attention to help his draft stock. So now he's making a good contribution. Andrej Karic hasn't had that same transition, and I feel like he adds good depth just to have a veteran body who, whether he makes the block or not, I feel like he probably knows where to go at the right time. But, yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I don't think he's necessarily ready at the SEC level. I think he has a year or two of eligibility, so he could obviously get there. But even at its barest, he's a veteran guy who can give you some depth on the line.
Very true. Very true. And you would think that Dont'e Thornton would be that for receiver. The reason I wouldn't be as big on Dont'e Thornton is he just, again, I told Dave about this yesterday. Look, and you've covered some practices, so you might be able to provide more insight than I could on this, but I'm seeing the raw talent from Dont'e Thornton, but I'm seeing a complete lack of effort all around. I mean, I just got to say it. It's I've called it disgraceful. I've seen a guy who does not care to fight for any ball, any jump ball, any 50-50 ball. The only impressive play he's made all year was that catch against Florida where Joe Milton dropped the only dime Joe Milton's ever dropped in his life. And it was on a third down play, but I haven't seen Dont'e Thornton go up on any of those type of balls. And I think that at this point, I just don't think he cares. And I think he took his NIL money to come to Tennessee, and I think he says he doesn't really care about anything else. And I'm calling him out. I hope he hears this. I'm going to say it straight up. I don't think Dont'e Thornton cares, and so I don't think it's a big deal if he's back on the field. I think Chaz Nimrod, Caleb Webb. I know you talk about going deep, but all these guys were fringe 4-stars coming out of high school, depending on the recruiting service you go by. So with a year in the system, I feel like you can trust Nimrod, Caleb Webb, or even Nathan Leacock, who, by the way, if you remember, made a lot of headlines last year during the bowl practices as he was an early enrollee. So I just think you're likely to get one of those guys to be able to fill the void. And also, again, I think Dont'e Thornton being out there is just – I just think he's just an 11th guy and utterly useless because I don't think he's going to do what you need a wideout in this position to do.
I think Dont'e Thornton's probably been hindered by injury some. And you also have to remember, I mean, the offense has either been the wide receiver screens or over the top. You haven't seen a lot of intermediate game. And I feel like we almost have to see the intermediate game for Dont'e Thornton to shine. I will say, though, with the absence of Brew McCoy, you probably won't get another wide receiver out of any of the names listed that can block like Brew McCoy did. You just don't have another receiver built that way. So even if you don't have a Dont'e Thornton going up for jump balls, like you say, I still think the blocking is going to be the biggest thing with Brew McCoy out. And your wide receiver game is going to struggle because with Brew McCoy on the outside, you're basically throwing to a running back. So you don't get that with Dont'e Thornton or really any of those wide receivers. But Dont'e Thornton-wise, I feel like it's almost he was hindered with injury a little bit in fall camp, kind of had a lingering injury. I wonder if he's struggling to get the system because it's not easy, definitely, to come from halfway across the country to learn the system. But then again, we'll have to see what happens. I don't know if they even want to move Dont'e Thornton to the outside to replace Brew McCoy, or if they just want to call up one of the young guys and kind of keep Dont'e Thornton exclusively in the slot. That's another question mark. Josh Heupel didn't really mention it that much. He said every wide receiver could play inside or outside. Well, obviously they can play inside or outside, but he didn't answer the question if Dont'e Thornton will play inside or outside. So that's still to be determined, and that's something we can probably find out here pretty soon.
Yeah, it was actually really cagey the way he did it yesterday, which I didn't get. Is the gamesmanship that much that you can't let us know if like Squirrel White's going to play on the outside or not when we know he's going to play in the slot? It's he's probably the worst at gamesmanship that's unnecessary. This is a guy who wouldn't even tell us who the starting quarterback was going to be 2 years ago and ahead of his first game against Bowling Green. Like, do you need that against Bowling Green?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Dont'e Thornton can give you on the outside that he wouldn't give you in the slot anyway. Just be a taller guy on the outside. So yeah, the gamesmanship was a little much, I thought, but still, I don't know if they want to try to test him at the outside. We haven't seen him at the outside that I can remember. And you have some younger guys like a Caleb Webb who have stepped up already. So do you want to go with the youth, or do you want to try to move Dont'e outside and just keep experimenting with him? I think honestly you probably just want to leave him in the slot, because if, like we talked about, if he's struggling in the slot and he's kind of taking him a couple games to get it under his belt, I think the worst thing you could do is move his position and give him a whole nother set of problems and assignments on the field.
So how does Tennessee's screen game work without Brew McCoy? Because you're right. The biggest thing that Tennessee was able to do was with Brew out there was to block. And Thornton can't replace that. Can they still run these same screens? Or Joe Milton's going to have to start completing more passes downfield, right?
Yeah, I think you have to open. I don't see how you can do anything else besides the intermediate game, because the only way the screens work is you hit a guy like Squirrel White on the outside, and then you have Brew McCoy take off the first cornerback. Well, Squirrel White can get 5, 6, 7 yards with the speed easily, plus more if he can battle. Well, it takes that away. You don't have to respect it as much. Brew McCoy, we saw his blocks on Joe Milton's 70, 81-yard run or whatever it was to start the game. That's going to be the biggest place they miss Brew McCoy. I don't think you have a replacement. I think you're going to have to open up the slants, the posts over the middle of the field, and try to get something working there and hope that Joe Milton can complete it, because your screen passes are going to go from the 10, 11 yards they were going for to 7, 8. I guess you have to open up the middle of the field.
Yeah, that's going to happen, and Joe Milton's going to have to improve his touch on the ball on those slants and things like that over the middle of the field. So I would say that, yeah, that's going to have to be the case. And the message board is bringing it up. Ragged Top Tom says they're going to have to start calling downfield throws now, no more 12 to 15 screens a game. And then this is going to show why Joe Milton may be a liability or maybe not. We don't know. We'll see. I get why people think he will be on this. D comes in and, okay, D's trying to play the Heupel is smarter than me. I'll never understand his ways. That's why he makes $9 million. We're going to talk about Heupel's salary a little bit later in the show. But D also says Dont'e can't hold on to anything more than 10 yards. That's an interesting one. And Travis Case, this is an interesting point. Could they switch it up to the tight end screens? I floated to Dave lining up Jacob Warren like in the wideout spot a couple of times a game. But the only problem is the minute you do that, that's when you probably know the screen is coming, isn't it?
Yeah, you're going to have to, either with him or Castles, you're going to have to line him up in the wideout spot and show that you're not going to call a screen, which means you also have to have tight end routes from the wideout spot. So I'm not sure what they could do. They also don't have to throw it to the tight end. You could just throw it to the wide receiver and use the tight end as the lead blocker. Or maybe even Warren and Castles both line up in the slot sometimes. Maybe have them in the slot and the wide receiver just run towards them after they catch the screen. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with it there, but you're right. As soon as they see a tight end split out wide, because they do to the slot some, so you kind of expect that. But as soon as you see a tight end split out wide, something's up and they're running a screen. It's not very hard to tell. So you're going to have something to mix it up and keep defenses off balance.
Exactly. And what will help, to be fair, on the offensive line is about Jeremiah Crawford. This is why I'm going back to Jeremiah Crawford being the most important. Jeremiah Crawford back in at right tackle, he'll be able to, spread out and get some of those outside blocks too on certain screens when the pass is thrown. So I think now he can't block downfield, obviously, but as you and I know, college football has been very, very loose with the downfield blocking rules over the past 5 years, I could say, and Heupel's taking advantage of that. So somebody like Jeremiah Crawford could really cash in on that.
Yeah, the whole downfield blocking thing is just, I mean, if you call it once, you have to call it every time, but then they only call it on 3rd down and 10 whenever it's needed. I don't blame Heupel for taking advantage of it because I do the same thing if they're not going to call it.